Alright then, we are back to assembling this OMX-27. We're going to do the pots and encoder, but first I forgot to tell you something important when we did the OLED. So if we're looking at this, uh, take a look at the orientation of that OLED. It looks a little crooked to me, like it's not really on there straight, which kind of bugs me. So what I forgot to tell you was when you tack the one corner down, take a look at it from the top and see if it looks straight. If it doesn't, you're going to want to kind of nudge a little bit. So now what I'm going to need to do is heat up these pins and see if I can give it a little nudge. And so I'm going to add a little extra solder to each of these because they're a little tough to heat up and get them kind of warm. And kind of press my finger against this to sort of nudge it a little bit while I heat each one up in order. And it's going to maybe move it just enough to where it looks square again to me. Because OCD is going to kick in and I'll be like, man, can't believe I didn't get that dang display on there straight. And you just want to give it a little tension, don't press on it too hard. And as you sort of do each one of these, it's going to move ever so slightly. I think. Maybe one more quick level head here. Much easier to do this at the very beginning when you first solder it rather than after the fact. Just giving these all a little extra love. And looks a little more straight to me. Give these one more little quick hit. Alright. That's more square. Cool. Now, let's do the encoders and the encoder and the pots. The encoder comes with a washer and a nut. Don't need these. You throw them on there if you want, but you don't need them. Like they're not holding anything in place. But if you feel like you want to use it, do something with it, put it on there, and forget about it because it's not. These are just kind of freestanding. So I might as well snap the encoder into place first, and let's see what's going on here. Sometimes, got to go the right direction. So the 2 pins go to the top, 3 pins to the bottom. Let's go over here to this guy. And what can sometimes happen here is one pin will be bent or something, but you want to make sure that's in there nice and snug. And we're going to double check that in a minute. With the pots, now a trick here is squeeze the 2 mounting pins together just a little bit before you throw them in, because they're probably too wide to fit in the holes, and then you don't have to force it quite as much. Let's see if we can get on the top camera there. So you can get in there, and it's kind of a tight fit, so you might need to squeeze those together a little bit more, and just a tiniest little bit. You don't want to go too crazy, and until they snap in. So, and it might be a little wiggly at that point, but that's fine. So again, squeeze the 2 legs together and snap it in place. Make sure you're not bending the pins. So, drop the pins. Let's see if we can get this over here. So drop the pins in the slot and then kind of see there how wide those legs are, I think, on the top cam. So let's squeeze it a little bit. Do it again. Great. And this last one is good. Now, look at them from the top. Make sure all your pins are connected. Look at it from the bottom. Make sure all the pins are sticking out as they should be. Then, as is my mantra here, tack 1 pin down and we'll make sure that they're nice and flat. So you could leave it angled like this, but it's a little tricky. I would suggest find something to prop up the board. I've got a busted piece of some plastic 3D printed thing here for a camera, so I'm going to use that. And that's going to keep it kind of flat for me. And let's see if I can get kind of a good place here. All right, so I'm going to just real quick get some solder on each one pin of each of these, just enough to hold it in place, make sure it's good. When you get to the encoder, again, it doesn't really matter, just any old pin will do. And don't do all these yet, we're going to do a little step here first. So, those are all tacked in place, I think. Good. So, my technique here is kind of get the board perpendicular to the surface, press your thumb against the bottom of the top of the pot, and then you're going to heat up that pad you applied some solder to. Just make sure it's flat. Like, look at it from the top, make sure it's not got too much wiggle to it, it's not moving around. Most of these are already pretty okay because they're snapped in and don't really need to move too much. The encoder, however, will be our obvious one to look at here. And those pots aren't going there. So looking at the encoder, it's a little bit angled right there, right? So I can sort of press on it and get it to be more flat and a little bit more vertical, which is what we want. So I'm going to heat up my pad, maybe even press up. Like the whole thing moved a little bit, so that's good. So I'm pressing down, let go of the thing, keep pressing on it, and then let go. So now it should be a little bit more straight. Looks good to me. Let's look at it from over there. Pretty alright. Alright, let's check that last one's got a little bend to it. Because sometimes they're not snapped all the way in. There we go. Oh, you know what's going on? It can be helpful is this front edge wasn't pushed all the way down, so you want to make sure those pins are sticking a good ways out. And the thing, the pot is fully seated. This isn't hard, but you just don't want your pots angled. Let's see if we can even get it. You don't want them angled that way. So just make sure there's looks like the right amount of pins are sticking out. And we'll go back and solder the rest of them in place. So in this case, I'm pressing down and then sort of towards the table a little bit to make sure that they're sort of nice and snug. All right, look at it from the top. They look nice and straight. Look good to me. Let me get this kind of prop back up, and then without smashing anything too much, we're going to go through and solder them all in place. So. I'm giving those ones I tacked a little extra solder. So these four. Don't worry about the mounting lugs yet. And even then, we want to get that sort of last to make sure everything's cool. All right, let's get the button contacts. These top two on the encoder are for the button or the switch that's built in to get those presses. And then down here, these are the actual turning connections and ground or power. One of those two. I can't remember. Ground's up there. Power's down here, maybe. I think I know what I was talking about. All right, looks good to me. And my soldering technique, anyway, is I get kind of sideways because I've got this really fine chiseled, no, it's just a fine tip, pointy tip, and I like to get kind of sideways on things and get as much surface contact, sort of the side edge of the iron on whatever it is I'm working on, and you want a lot of surface area contact. So for me, I kind of get sideways, but I can also get from the top and do sort of my fine things. All right, let's look and see. Things are still looking okay as far as sort of our. Let's get the down the row view there. Pretty straight to me. So let's get the solder lugs next. Now, suggestion here is you only really need to fill some of this hole with some solder. You don't need to like fill this entire hole and like just get it bathing in solder. But if you put the iron on the inside and then get a little solder flowing maybe on the outside, I like to get this outside joint here sort of filled with solder and then maybe fill in the rest. But again, you just want to get that to have a nice positive connection. And so if I tuck the soldering iron into this little notch, I can sort of feed some solder in. Give it a good 3-4 seconds to flow nicely. And we're going to do the same thing over here. And you might need to move the solder to either side. Make sure it's flowing. Looking good to me. Let's see, tuck in, clean that up. And the best of all possible worlds, you want to feed that solder against the part, not against the iron, but I'm a little lazy, so I kind of feed it to the iron and then let it flow around. But sometimes you have to kind of jump start it, like that. Both sides. Let's go back over here. The easiest part of the whole setup here is these potentiometers. But easy to screw it up, I guess. All right, bam. Keep hitting the camera with my visor. Magnifying glass thing. Might give these encoder lugs just a little more solder than the pots, just because they weren't as sort of as positively snapped in as the as alpha pots were. It doesn't have to be like overflowing in solder, just enough to hold it in place. Keep it nice mechanical. Joint there. Last one. Alright, maybe give those a quick little inspect. And it's pretty okay to me. I'm going to forego cleaning the board here. I should suggest get your, get something to kind of clean up that flux. Because, you kind of got little schmutz on there. It could cause some problems down the road. Makes debugging a little harder if there's like goop all over the place. But we've got the majority of things for our first half of the build. Well, the hard parts, I guess. All that's left is the key switches. But first, we need to take a break and make sure that things work. And we're going to test this real quick. So let's get that kind of lined up here. And I have already gone and flashed the TNC with the OMX-27 firmware. That's probably, if we need another video for that, we can, but we're going to take that as read right now that the firmware is loaded on the TNC. You could do that prior to putting the TNC on even. You can flash the firmware ahead of time, but when you're at this stage, go over to the computer, plug it in, load up Teensy Loader, drop the hex file on, you're good to go. Now, what you're going to see when things get started up, if everything worked right, let me get my USB cable going here, we're going to see the startup sort of process and the LEDs will light up. So this is a good test to see if things are working. So I'm going to plug it in and see the OLED will show the stuff going on. We get this rainbow display of the LEDs, and then we're going to see some stuff on the OLED here, which is some potentiometers and notes and things like that. So I'm going to do that one more time just to show you. So we're going to plug it in, and it's going to power's going to hit right away. Display does a little thing. Rainbow across all the LEDs. It goes by pretty fast, so you might need to do that a couple of times if you're not sure. Now, something that's kind of helpful at this stage is to get your tweezers. It could be these guys. These are probably a little easier, but you could use the regular old, these kind of tweezers. And we're going to test each switch. So when the firmware loads up, it should go in MIDI mode. So each switch, which is these guys, is a key switch. So we're going to sort of fake that out, and what we're looking for is the bottom two holes of each of these pads is the switch connection. So if we take tweezers here and hold those two things, we're going to see that LED light up, which is showing that we've triggered that switch. At the same time, you're going to see a note value up here on the OLED. So like right now, that was note 59. This is note 60, note 62. Hey, where's 61? 61's up here. So that's 61, 62, 63, 64. So you can go through and check each individual switch to make sure that the switch action is going to eventually work. If for some reason when you do this it doesn't light up the LED, maybe there's a problem with this diode that's right adjacent to each key. That gets into sort of some advanced troubleshooting. Get in touch. I can try to help you with that if that's the case. But this is just a good way to see, do all of the switches light up the LED, check all of them just to be sure, and things are cool. So while you're here, you could also check and see if what the pots are doing. So if you turn one of the pots, this is a CC value. Look at the OLED, and maybe we got to kind of turn over here. I don't think it's going to show up on the other screen. But as you turn these, you're going to see a CC value or CC number. So this is CC21, and you're going to see some numbers 0 to 127. So this is CC22. It changes up there at the top. This is CC23. This is CC24. This is CC7, which is sort of set to volume at the very beginning. And we're cool. So next thing is the encoder. We can see if it does stuff. In the basic mode here, if you turn it, you're going to change the octave here on the screen. So that looks like it's working. So the encoder turn is working. That's great. And then if we press and hold, well, if we press a short press, it's going to light up the channel, and you can change the channel. But if you press and hold it for 2 seconds or 3 seconds, you're going to see the mode indicator show up. So right now we're in MIDI, which is MI, and we could change to sequencer or organelle mother. If you press again once, it's going to drop back into that particular mode you're in. So everything seems to be working. Great. Another thing you could do at this point is if you're plugged into your computer, you can open up something like MIDI monitor and check and see if your USB MIDI is sending properly to something. You could open up Ableton or another DAW and check and see if you're getting MIDI values. And then maybe the last thing is you probably want to check the MIDI out jack to some sort of device. If this is something you're likely to use, hardware MIDI out, you need an 1/8 inch to DIN adapter, or an 1/8 inch to 1/8 inch if you've got a device that takes an 1/8 inch in. And there's a switch for the 2 different modes, or the 2 different types of MIDI there. On this first generation, this switch indicator legend may be backwards. I still haven't confirmed this. I think I had it right, but maybe it's wrong. So you may actually just need to sort of try both of them and see which one works. If you know one's an A, and please tell me if you like can confirm that it's backwards, so I can fix it on the next round of boards. But yeah, you want to test all this stuff ahead of time. So the important thing is test, make sure all the LEDs work, and that the switches work, the switch not the action of the switch themselves, but like that the connections work, to make sure that these diodes don't have a problem. If for some reason a diode is missing, something's weird, get in touch and we'll figure out how to troubleshoot that. But that's it. This is together. This is working. So the next step is assembling the key plate and then soldering the switches on, which is pretty straightforward, but we're going to get into that maybe in another video in a bit. But that's the hard stuff so far. Thanks.